All right, let's dive in. Today, we're heading deep into the foggy peaks of California's Santa Lucia Mountains to chase down a mystery that's been captivating people for centuries, the legend of the Dark Watchers.
You know that feeling, right? You're out hiking, maybe the sun's getting low, and all of a sudden, bam, the hair on your arms just stands up. You get this really powerful, kind of creepy feeling that you are absolutely not alone, that someone or something is watching you.
Well, for centuries, people hiking in this one specific mountain range have reported a lot more than just a feeling. They claim they've actually seen silent, shadowy figures watching them from the ridgetops. So, who or what are these figures? Let's get into what the stories say about these strange, shadowy guardians of the mountains. The name we have for them actually comes from early Spanish settlers, Los Vigilantes Oscuros, which translates to the Dark Watchers. And the description is amazingly consistent. People always describe these tall, dark, human-like shapes that just stand there, perfectly still, just watching. They never seem to approach, they don't threaten anyone, they just observe. And listen, this isn't just some campfire story we're talking about here. The legend of the Dark Watchers actually has a documented history, and it was really cemented in our culture by some of the greatest writers of the 20th century. The stories probably go way, way back, maybe even starting with the native Chumash people, but we don't have firm records of that. The first real documented accounts come from Spanish settlers back in the 1700s. But then, things just exploded in the 1930s, all thanks to two literary giants who happened to live right there in the area. First up was the poet Robinson Jeffers. He lived right there in the mountains, and he just perfectly captured how eerie these sightings are. That line, "certainly are not human." Wow, it just gives you chills, right? It paints this picture of something that looks like us, but is something else entirely, something that can just dissolve into thin air. And then, just a year later, the Nobel Prize winner John Steinbeck basically launched them into superstardom. In his short story, Flight, he has a mother give this chilling warning to her son. This one little passage took the Dark Watchers from this local myth and turned them into a piece of global folklore. So, what are people actually seeing? Well, over all this time, eyewitness accounts have built up this weirdly and surprisingly consistent profile of what a Dark Watcher encounter is like. Across hundreds of stories spanning centuries, the details are so similar, it's kind of spooky. They're always described as these tall, featureless silhouettes. They often look like they're wearing a cloak and a big, wide-brimmed hat, and sometimes they're even carrying a staff. And here's the key part, their behavior. They stand totally still, and the second you try to get closer or even just stare at them for too long, poof, they're gone. And yeah, when we say tall, we are not kidding. Some reports claim these figures look like they're up to 15 feet high. I mean, can you even imagine seeing that silhouette against a foggy sky on some remote mountain ridge? It's an intimidating and, let's be honest, a terrifying image. But you know, the stories aren't always scary. And get this, there's a really cool personal connection here. John Steinbeck's own mom, who was a school teacher in the area, claimed she saw them. She actually believed they were guardians and would leave little offerings for them like fruit and nuts. And she said she'd find flowers left in their place. Okay, so this really brings us to the big question, right? Are these some kind of supernatural beings, or is there a perfectly good scientific reason for what thousands of people think they've seen? Let's break down the two sides of this debate. So, on one side, you've got the folklore, the belief that these are spirits or maybe guardians of the land, maybe even beings from another dimension that watch over the mountains. And on the other side? Well, science has a few ideas, all rooted in things like optics, psychology, and the very unique environment to those mountains. The number one scientific theory is a phenomenon called the Brocken specter. So picture this, the sun's behind you, you're high on a mountain, and it's foggy or misty down below. Your own shadow gets projected onto the mist, but it gets magnified, looking like this huge, dark, human-like figure. And of course, it vanishes when you move. It fits the description perfectly. Then you have something called pareidolia. This is basically just our brains being, well, our brains. We have this powerful, almost primal need to see patterns, especially human faces and figures, in random shapes like clouds or rocks or shadows. It's a survival instinct hardwired into us. So at dusk, when the light is low, your brain is going to try really hard to turn an ambiguous shape on a ridge into a person. And that's not all. You've got other things that could be at play here. Just being exhausted at high altitudes can cause hallucinations. There's something called infrasound, low-frequency sound from wind whipping through canyons that can actually trigger feelings of anxiety and dread, that whole being watched sensation. And you can't rule out complex mirages either. But even with all of these very logical, very plausible scientific explanations, the legend of the Dark Watchers just won't go away. The mystery is just as much a part of those mountains as the rocks and the fog. But here's the real kicker. For all these sightings, for centuries of stories, there is not one single, undisputed photograph of a Dark Watcher. Not one. The folklore says they don't like modern technology. Science would just say there's nothing there to take a picture of. Either way, that elusiveness is a huge part of what makes them so fascinating. So that kind of leaves us with one last question. For you, if you were up there, hiking in the Santa Lucias as the sun was going down, and you saw a tall, dark figure on a distant ridge, just watching you, and you remember Steinbeck's warning not to stare, would you look away?